Casey Ruff, welcome back to the Primal Foundations podcast.
Tony, my friend, it's such an honor to be back on with you. So grateful this year we got to meet in person finally and hang out in person. Um, all the videos you shoot with kettlebell training, whatever, is absolutely legit. I got to witness in person you actually practice what you preach. That made me very happy.
It was great to meet you too, and Hack Your Health was an awesome experience, and I got to hang out with you and some of our other friends, Adrian, James Lehman, and the whole crew. Life like Jake. You are though the first, the first person ever on this podcast. How does that feel?
Oh man. Oh, it's like I told you then. It's such an honor, and it's a great strategy to then start low and just work your way up. And all your amazing guests. Your show's great, dude. You've done such a great job growing the show. The rebrand that you've done recently looks really, really good. And I really like the episode you did recently with another person that we both met in Austin, Chris Bates. I really love that episode you did with him, and you guys did a great job like uncovering some new ground and stuff that I hadn't really considered before. And yeah, man, you're doing a great job with the show. Apparently, running out of great guests, you're back to the bottom of the barrel, but
No, no,
we'll build
no.
up after that.
Guys, he always says this. It's not true. He's like, "Oh, you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel." But for the listeners that don't know, Casey is a personal trainer, lifestyle coach, performance enhancement specialist, and the host of the very successful podcast Boundless Body Radio, which has over 600 episodes. And to learn more about Casey's background and journey to finding carnivore diets and low carb space, be sure to check episode 1 of the Primal Foundations podcast. Isn't it so fun to listen to your first episodes?
They're a bit cringy, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. I re-listened to ours and I'm just like, oh my God, I think I'm getting better at this, but I don't know. But we kind of talked off air a little bit, but I wanted to set the stage today by revisiting, some of your experience from episode 1, specifically regarding your use of a metabolic cart with your clients. Can you tell the listeners, some of the results you were getting when you observed your previous approach versus now that you've changed your mindset on nutrition?
Cool. Yeah, it's a great question. I had a really unique opportunity when I was training to be a personal trainer, which I never intended to do personal training. It was something that I was basically studying architecture in college, but I joined a gym and started observing the trainers. Thought like, oh, that might be fun to do for a little while and have a job while I'm doing college to do this other thing. But when I was hired on as a personal trainer, after I figured out which certification I needed to get and went and studied that for a few months and got my certification, when my club hired me, the club itself and the trainers were working with heart rate monitors, and they were using what you mentioned, metabolic carts, to determine things like VO2 max scores and heart rate zones and training you know protocols and things like that. I had been doing all of that stuff on my own since I was like 16 years old. Like I was starting to get into cycling when Lance Armstrong was winning some of his Tours de France, and so heart rate training was being pushed into the limelight. And I had, much to my parents' chagrin, they bought me a TV VCR combo to take to college in my dorm, and I returned it to buy a polar heart rate monitor. Um, so basically, when this club hired me on to be their personal trainer, I knew more about heart rate and heart rate training than any of the other trainers did. And so it was kind of a unique thing that I was able to slide into and really help kind of educate the staff and teach them how these things were used. And so very soon after that, not only was I doing personal training, but I was being trained on how to use this tool called a metabolic cart and how we could measure certain aspects of human metabolism, and we could help coach people to get certain results based on that. So to explain to the listeners what we're talking about, a metabolic cart literally is, think about like a push cart that's almost like a platform that's got a computer on it. And it also has this box, which is an analyzer. And this analyzer is attached to an umbilical tube that goes up and attaches to a mask. And a person wears this mask over their face. So air is airtight. It can't escape. They can only breathe in and out through the mouthpiece. And the sensor on this umbilical thing sat in the mouthpiece. And so basically, as you are breathing, whatever you're doing, this metabolic cart is measuring your breath and again, making some analyzations based on what is being measured in the breath. So first of all, The primary thing that we were measuring is the overall volume of breath, that your volume of breathing tells you directly how many calories your body is burning at that time. So, for example, you and I are just sitting here, we're having a conversation, we're both nasal breathing, we're not breathing a lot. So that just means we're not burning a lot of calories. If we were doing one of your kettlebell workouts, you were teaching me how to do the press. Obviously, that was like much harder. I was breathing more, I was burning more calories doing that. And so the volume of my oxygen changed. So that would be the primary thing that we were measuring to determine how many calories somebody would be burning. And then secondary to that in the beginning was these analyzers would be able to determine the amount of oxygen that you're breathing in and out, but it would also go one step further and determine the amount of carbon dioxide you were also breathing out as a byproduct of the oxygen that you were bringing in. And that's a really important number that's called respiratory quotient or respiratory exchange ratio. So either RQ or RER for short. And that is that ratio between the oxygen that you're breathing in and the carbon dioxide that you're breathing out. And that's important because when you're burning fat versus when you're burning carbohydrate, it makes two completely different values in that exchange ratio of the oxygen and carbon dioxide. So not only could we say like, hey, you're burning X number of calories, but we could also say, you know, given whatever state you're in, this is how much fat you're burning and this is how much carbohydrate you're burning, your two primary fuel sources. So the two tests that we would be running and using this equipment for, one would be a resting test where you would just come in and like lay down basically and do nothing. And we'd run the thing for maybe 20 or 30 minutes and extrapolate that data to be like a 24-hour period to tell you how many calories do you burn in 24 hours and are you burning more fat or are you burning more carbohydrates when you're resting? And then the other test would be like a VO2 max test where you'd be on a treadmill, bicycle, rower, stair climber, whatever, where every few minutes we're ramping up the protocol, making things harder and harder and harder until you tap out. And so not only does that tell us what is your VO2 max or the maximum amount of oxygen you can take in at a certain rate divided by your body weight. That's a big number that determines cardiovascular, fitness for endurance athletes, especially, but also would be able to determine as your heart rate is increasing, how is the mix of fuels that you're burning changing? Are you burning more fat? Where does the fat burning kind of peak out before that drops, before your carbohydrate burn starts to be the predominant fuel and then greatly take over until your maximum intensity is essentially you're burning what is nearly like 100% carbohydrate to fuel your highest intensity exercise. So I hope that's a good kind of overview of what this thing was and what we were kind of using it for. And to kind of finish the question, I'll just say like in the beginning, when we were first starting using these things, the conversation was much more around calories than it was the substrate utilization. So I don't remember talking that much about how much fat or how much carbohydrate somebody was burning. That wasn't the primary thing that we were talking about. It was more like, okay, at rest, you burn 2,000 calories. We just measured that on you, Tony, personally. We had little sliders that say, look, okay, what is your energy expenditure during a day? Is it very light? Basically, like, are you sedentary? A few steps in between to like what is very active. You're working on your feet all day and working with your hands all day. That would change, your movement calories for the day. And then we could also use the slider to say like, well, do you work out? Let's say you burn 500 extra calories of workout every single day. We add that to the tally. And then we just kind of use that math formula to say, like, what is your goal? Are you trying to gain weight? Are you trying to stay weight stable? Or are you trying to lose weight? And if you're trying to lose weight, we just move the slider down to that goal and down to the rate of weight loss that you're trying to achieve. If you said, I'd like to lose weight, we'll say, great, with all your numbers. Let's say at rest, you're burning 2,000 calories. When we factor everything else in, you're burning 3,000 calories. So what if you want to lose weight? Well, let's dial the slider down to the maximum where you can lose 2 pounds a week based on this formula. And that may mean that you have to move an additional 500 calories and burn those 500 calories. And let's make sure that you're eating 2,500 calories or 500 calories less. And that delta is 1,000 calories, which if you multiply that 1,000 calories by 7 days or 1 week, you basically get 2 pounds, 7,000 calories. If a pound of fat is 3,500 calories. And so we would just say like, okay, great. I'm going to send you away. You're going to eat 2,500 calories. You're going to burn 3,500 calories. In 1 week, you'll lose 2 pounds. By the second week, you lose 4 pounds. By the third week, you lose 6 pounds. and on and on. And of course, we just, got in the habit of thinking like, wow, I told this person exactly what to eat and exactly how to exercise. And after 3 or 4 weeks, they're not getting the results we talked about. This person is failing. They're not doing what we set out to do, even though I gave them the perfect formula to do this. I don't know what their problem is, but they're just not very compliant, essentially. That's pretty much all we used it for in the beginning.
Yeah, and and again, it's not anybody's fault, right? Like, this is something that has been taught to us. And I mean, when I went to school, we were, okay, if you want to lose weight, you got to get into this calorie deficit, and these are the things that you have to do. The one clip that I clipped from our last podcast, and I put it on my page, was, you're like, we are looking at a mathematical equation to solve a biological problem.
Mm.
And I love that. I mean, this is setting the stage for, you're getting people that they may have been following exactly what you're doing. They're still not getting the results. So what did you kind of find out was kind of moving the dial a little bit better?
So right off the bat, I will say the first things that we were learning were basically that if you over dieted, I mean, you could do this overeating as well, but if you were under eating vastly, you had done lots of different diets, and you paired that with over exercise, at the very least, like, we got in the habit of understanding that you would reduce your metabolic rate. Like, we have a formula that we would use to calculate what I would expect for your metabolism to be based on your age, your height, your weight, and your gender. Anybody can look this up. If you look up BMR or RMR calculator, it will ask you, it's called the Harris-Benedict formula, and it will basically allow you to punch in those variables and maybe a few other more advanced variables if you know them. And basically, it will give you an expected value for how many calories you should be burning at rest. And we knew that if you manipulated the calories, you could manipulate your own metabolism. I said you could do it whether you're overeating as well. We did notice that if you overate, these people might be pretty big, but they also seem to have a high caloric burn. Their body is using some of that fuel, and it is ramping up the metabolism and burning more calories. The flip side, again, if somebody was not eating very much, they were doing chronic dieting, they were over exercising, and usually a combination of the two, we might find that person's metabolic rate may be 300 calories, 500 calories, 800 calories less than whatever the expected value is. Another really good example of this is what would have happened to our good mutual friend, Adrian. So Adrian did the Biggest Loser contestant, and this was studied in 2016, where they took former Biggest Loser contestants, and they not only showed how much weight they regained after they stopped the contest, which was quite a bit, but also they did measurements like I'm describing, where they tested how many calories these people were burning. And even though they'd gained a great majority of the weight back, their metabolisms were far lower than what they should have been, even 6 years after getting booted from the contest, which is exactly what happened to Adrian, which found that is not the sustainable way to go. I did the same thing. I measured somebody who had just gotten kicked off of the Biggest Loser. This is back in 2010, 2011. And I remember, she had just been in whatever hell camp these guys do to these people. She described the workouts are 6 hours a day. You're on a very tight 1,200 calorie a day budget. And sure enough, based on her age, height, weight, and gender, we expected her metabolic rate to be about 2,000 calories at rest, and it came back about 1,000. So already she had suppressed her own innate calorie burn by 50%. And so, again, at least in the very beginning, when we weren't manipulating fat and carbohydrates very much, at least we knew that, like, okay, you can't diet. You need to, at the very minimum, try to eat past your resting metabolic rate to make sure you're not crashing your metabolic rate. Now I understand that to be a little bit different than what we did then, but at least in the very beginning, that was something that we determined. I would say later on, something that you will be able to appreciate, a reason why you and I started kind of working together is in 2012, our company was doing some consulting with a guy who was also doing these tests with a different company, but he was coaching endurance athletes, and he was finding that not only could you manipulate things like heart rate zones and your what people call like zone 2 training, or your like best endurance training, not only could you really manipulate that with your training itself, but you can also manipulate it with the diet. And if you started changing the diet, you could change the substrate that somebody would burn. And so, as he was describing it, he would say that, like, his triathlon athletes over the course of a year have different training phases. There's a phase where you push really hard. There's a phase where you recover. There's a phase where you kind of deload and like really like let your fitness fall off a little bit so that you can then start to build it up over the years. And so your training is always changing based on the year, but also based on that is your nutrition can change. And so he was describing top level Ironman triathletes that he was coaching that are eating, high amounts of fat, and they were eating bacon and cream. And I'm listening to this guy going, okay, that's really weird. I've never heard this at all. And he's describing an experience that I had never had when I was cycling in races and whatever. Like you have such a small amount of carbohydrate in your body that you can store. Now, what happens is if you go too hard or too long, you run out of that energy. And I think all of us who have done endurance sport knows what it feels like if you go out really hard and you don't have enough of the sugary stuff to keep that topped off, and you're burning it at such a rate that it's depleting. At some point, that's going to run out. So endurance athletes will call that bonking or hitting the wall, and it's basically all of your glucose in the body is just kind of out, and you hit the wall, you bonk. And so what he was describing is these athletes at top levels were not eating very many calories while they were going, but they were not bonking. Like they'd be able to do very long endurance runs and rides without ever having that experience. And I couldn't figure it out at first until I really understood that, like, wow, okay, if we shift the metabolism towards fat burning and we can continue doing that at very high rates while we're exercising in certain heart rate ranges, we're saving all of that carbohydrate that we would be burning. We're not burning it at nearly the same rate anymore. And it might be well within the range that the body can just naturally replenish on its own as it's burning fat. Again, that took me a long time to realize, but that was kind of the first hint that nutrition was a big part of this. And maybe we'd gotten it wrong all those years with like the carbo loading and the pasta the night before and like all the cereals and breads and all the stuff I used to do before rides, and then packing all the bottles filled with sugar and the goo and the gel, all that stuff that we had. Like maybe we got that wrong, and we could change the diet to shift away from burning carbohydrates, which you run out of, to burning fat, which you really don't run out of.
Yeah, even if you have, well, I'm fairly lean. Well, you still have body fat on you. I mean, you could be fairly lean, an endurance athlete, but you're going to have body fat on you. Like you were saying earlier, a pound of fat, right, is 3,500 calories. You can do a lot with 3,500 calories. That's right. You could do a ton of work with 3,500 calories. And before we kind of move on to the next thing, you had some clients that with these kind of contests that you were doing something like contests, right? And you were kind of tracking the clients. You, with a group of clients, you lost how, as like a cumulative, there's like a ton of weight you guys all lost, right?
Yeah, so that's a great point in a different program that we were running. This gym got into doing weight loss contests because they made tons of money when they did them. And as trainers, we were just expected to sell a bunch of stuff. Like we had numbers and quotas of things that we had to like get to, as far as like people signing up with us, how much money they were going to spend on discounted products and services when people were really motivated for these contests. And so it wasn't really our choice. We just kind of had to do them as being employees. And it was your classic weight loss challenge. Like you're given a big packet of information, lots of shopping lists and recipes, and like people go to the stores and like, people are shopping for like rutabagas and like, milled grains and like all this weird stuff that's on these, then on these shopping lists. I had one of my clients call me crying from the grocery store because she couldn't find arrowroot powder. And I could barely like explain like what the hell that even was to her. It was really successful for the company. They sold a lot of stuff, but for the trainers, it was really miserable because we were giving people a program that we knew would fail. The compliance percentage was about 15%, meaning company-wide, if somebody started the contest, they would have about a 15% chance of even like standing on the scale at the end of the contest, regardless of whether they were successful or not. But again, company made a lot of money, so they started doing them more and more and more frequently, and we just hated them. We didn't like them. And it was one year that I was working with somebody. He was, very much a carbohydrate addicted type person. I recognized that he probably could stand to use a little bit more protein and fat. We did his consultation. He came back to me a few days later and said, like, well, I've lost like 3 pounds. Like, what's this keto stuff? And I remember thinking, like, that's great. I don't know that much about keto, but I know that fat is good for you. We learned that a few years ago. So let me kind of dive in and learn about this. And that's what kind of kicked off this intensity of like learning about low carbohydrate, you know, ketogenic diets and carnivore diets eventually. But it was after that contest finished. The guy won. He lost like 25 pounds. My wife and I were recognized as like the trainers that like helped him, so that was cool. And it was a day kind of like today. It was a hot July day. My wife and I were sitting outside. She worked for the same company at the time, like I said, and we were bitching about this contest that was going to come up again. We had to get new people, and we weren't looking forward to it. And I just said, like, what if we do something a little bit different? Like, this keto thing seemed to work really well for this one guy. Maybe we could just kind of do our own thing and maybe tell people, like, don't use the packet of information that the company's giving you. Let's give you different stuff. Let's give you different plans to follow. Let me find some different meal plans and maybe follow along whatever this like keto stuff is. And so that's what we did. We found some meal plans that were done by a website that I really loved at the time. We got some meal plans that were just, generally speaking, like low carbohydrate. So we told our people to eat, the pizzas with the low carb crust or the meat crust, or it was taco bowls that people could make without the tortillas, or things that people could throw on the grill in the summertime. Or, we had different meal plans that we would use in the wintertime when people were inside and cooking differently. And we would just send people a new week's worth of meal plans. We would tell people to eat as much as they could of these foods. Don't count calories. Don't worry about any of that. Just eat a lot of this. And then we also decided, like, it's not really going to be sustainable if we just give people meal plans. Let's teach people what is going on and why we're giving people kind of the opposite advice of what we've told people about whole grains and the value of fiber and vegetables and all this stuff. And so we would do free seminars, and we would just host these seminars, maybe in the beginning and during the contest, and then maybe in the middle, and then maybe in the end, to say, like, okay, this is why we're doing this. Here's things to look out for. As we're done with the contest, what are you going to do in the long term to really kind of help people through that process? And one advantage that we had is we already had a fairly nice body fat scale that we were using with people. So I just decided, like, okay, we've got this resource. Let's use this to track our people. Let's see what kind of results they can get. This is not like a randomized controlled trial. This is just like, this is the weight and body fat percentage of these people who did this contest. When they finished, this was their weight and body fat percentage. How did that change? What did that look like? And we did that for each of the contests that we did. It was an additional like 6 contests that we ran that way before the pandemic happened and kind of shut that all down, obviously. But as we were tracking, I thought the compliance might be better. I thought that people might lose fat better by doing this. And I was pretty astounded by the results. If I'm getting the numbers right, we had in those 6 groups of people, I believe we had something like 180 total people, and there was like 120 of those people that finished the contest. So the compliance percentage already was up in like the 60% range. The weight that was lost during these contests when we were tracking was 732 pounds. And based on this body fat scale, the fat that was lost was 720 pounds. So 732 total pounds, 720 pounds of fat. I knew that this way of thinking, like I said, I thought it might be better for fat loss, but I had no idea it would be that effective for really, truly like fat loss, like preserving lean mass, or not just like, oh, we lost tons of water. Like, no, people were really losing fat this way. And again, it's not a randomized controlled trial, but you had men, you had women, some were young, some were old, some lifted weights, some ran, some did yoga, some wanted to gain weight. Like, it was all across the board. And just to see like the change in body composition was, I thought, astounding. It was really great. And to be done with just some really simple meal plans that people generally like really liked, the job satisfaction, man, it was so much more fun to do these contests that initially didn't work, and now it was working great for everybody. And people that signed up with us felt like they were these little savages doing this like kind of different program that nobody knew about and the company had never found out about. But yeah, that was how that worked. And yeah, really amazing results we got with that.
And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because the retention rate you guys had of people, keeping people into the contest, knew that they were having, like, if you're having fun doing something and you enjoy it, like, you're going to stay. And plus, if it was like if you compared your old results to this new way of, or new approach, and it was like a 2, 3, 4% difference, you'd probably be like, I could go either way. Depends on the
Yeah.
person. But this is such a dramatic jump in the other direction. It's like, wow, like, this takes you into where, yeah, you're right. It's not a controlled study, but the numbers aren't lying. The numbers
Right.
aren't lying.
Yep.
It's super cool. And you get onto, and this is the next thing kind of I want to talk about is kind of now you've got all this information, you had this data, you had people enjoy the diet, people exercising, people having fun and feeling good. So when people want to get into a low carb diet or carnivore diet, how do you usually start them off? Because I feel, once it's getting popular, it's getting more popular, carnivore, keto, all that stuff. Once they're like, okay, I'm going to take this first step, how do you direct them to kind of where to go? Is it like you were saying, like, we're just going to give you like, here's some examples of some meals, educate them?
Great question. And the podcast host in me is going to ask you the same question. So you get ready, dude.
You
Want to
got
know
it.
how you coach your people.
Yeah, for sure.
And I do just one last comment on the weight loss contest.
Sure.
You're right. Like the numbers were great. The also like astounding thing was like the numbers were great and my energy's way better and I don't take naps and my kids' behavior all of a sudden is like way better and my joints all of a sudden feel better. Like there was all these other stories that you'd hear of like the weight loss was great. It was awesome, but it was almost like these other things are even like way better. Like my husband started doing this because I'm doing this and he just lost 15 pounds. Like all the other stories you heard were so awesome. And yeah, we have a tendency to want lots of people to do that and people have questions on where they should get started. And so I think the easiest place to start is a little bit unexpected for most people where they think you and I are here to take things away from people. And that's normally what people are used to as far as dieting. If they've worked with a trainer before, it's like, okay, you can't have soda anymore. You can't have sandwiches anymore. You can't do all these things. And it's like this overwhelming thing of all the things I can't do. And of course, the only thing the person's thinking of is like, well, I can't do all these things. They're not thinking like, what things can you do and what things would you enjoy? And so it's obviously individual and depends on the person. But generally speaking, I will say I want to start by putting more things in, especially if the person is used to depleting and is in a depleted state. Maybe they've done dieting, they're counting calories, they're worried about, the amount of food that they're eating. I want that person to, for the first time, maybe in their life, to actually feel like really full and satiated and let that be the starting point. So I almost always will try to encourage somebody to increase the amount of animal products that include proteins and fats, add that in, and do not try to restrict it whatsoever. Don't be, worried if you're eating, a triple cheeseburger and you think that might be too much, or you're eating 8 eggs where you're only eating 2 eggs before. Like, I want people to just kind of embrace the fact that this food is really, really good and nourishing for you, and go for it. Like when you get it, go to town, have a lot of it. Don't worry about the quantity. Once that starts to happen and people give themselves that permission, you just kind of easily start to see the hunger kind of just like easily drop out. And it's not like these people have to have a tremendous amount of willpower, but eventually they just stop snacking. They're not that hungry, so they don't snack, and that is really easy. Or maybe they wake up and like they kind of forgot that they didn't eat breakfast, and it's like, yeah, like we didn't tell you to not eat breakfast, but if you weren't that hungry, and it's way more convenient, like you and I were talking about offline, like if you're not that hungry and you're fasting and eating in this way, like it's way convenient. You just fast. That's the easiest thing you can do. Don't eat. It's great. You're not going to die. Like you'll be fine. And so that's where I like to start with people. It's challenging for me not to like jump on people in the beginning when they're saying like, oh, I'm eating lots of spinach smoothies and salads, and I'm eating like big bags of almonds from Costco. Like the carnivore coach in me wants to like get in there and be like, oxalates and nuts and seeds, too many. They've got all these anti-nutrients. And like, I need to bring myself back and just remember like where our starting point is for most people has to be much more achievable. And it's so much harder to build rapport with somebody when I already feel like I've got a second head growing out of my shoulders when I'm telling somebody about oxalates when they're not quite ready to hear that. So I have to bring myself back and remember to try to start with the animal products and just adding more of that in. Like I said, I'm not very good at that, and I jump in too many times when I could help people with easier information. But that's kind of what I do. I'd love to hear your approach, though. What do you
Yeah.
do?
I'm going to tell you what I do, but I want to get to that comment of, that's like, I look at what you just said. I talked about like, I want to jump in and I want to do, and I want to like say no to this, or I want to change this. That's like coaching strength training to me. Like if you're teaching a
So
deadlift,
good.
right? Okay. So your client's getting set up. All right. Make sure your foot position's correct. Put your feet in the floor, grab the bar correctly, engage your lats. And like, if they were doing that, and every rep, I was literally telling them exactly what to do, and just like, oh no, your hips, oh your shoulder, oh your head, your eye position, and then like before they're like, can I finish the freaking rep? You know what I mean? So I agree with you. I think that's a thing that's why coaches like that's why there's a premium for coaches, because you got to know as the person that's their client, when to give information and when to kind of like hold off. I think like overcoaching is an issue. It's just too much, like you were saying. But I agree 100%. I feel like not restricting them at the beginning, and that's a tough hurdle for a lot of people to get over. It is a big hurdle because they've done the Weight Watchers, they've done the Hollywood diet, the smoothie cleanse. So getting them to eat more fat, more red meat is great as much as they can tolerate. And I like what you said too. Like if they're having other things, it's okay for now. Like that's
That's okay
okay.
for now.
It's okay for now, because eventually that hunger is going to go away. You're going to feel satiated. My big thing, one of the first things I do before we do talk about adding more fat and being comfortable with it and eating till you are full. Like this is not a quote unquote restrictive diet. Yes, we're only eating meat. I get that. I get that. But I'm never like I'm never hungry. Like I can eat if I want to eat. If I'm not hungry, I don't eat. And that's like a liberating thing. It's so
Yeah.
liberating because we just want to walk around and we want to grab every single snack that we can. We're not even hungry. But how many times do you go to the fridge, open the fridge, you're not even hungry, you close the fridge, like you're like, why am I even in this thing?
Yep.
But my one thing I do, and I think I mentioned it to you before, if I have a client, the first thing that I do is we get rid of all the crap out of the pantries. Like that's a big thing. Now there's a caveat to that. If they're married, have a significant other, kid, like they don't want the wife or husband to come home and everything is gone, right? So that's like a caveat to it. But getting rid of, if they're in this, they want to really work on it. I'll tell them, take their computer, take your phone, let's go through your cabinets right now. Like one of the first sessions that I do. And I'm like, get rid of it, get rid of it, get rid of it. Within reason. Like if it's like salad, that's a spring salad or whatever that's still in there. Okay, you can finish that. That's totally fine. But get rid of just processed junk. There's no reason for it. That's where I kind of draw the hard line. Like if you
I
really
love that.
want to do this, I draw the hard line there. But like they want to have rice, they want to whatever. That's single ingredient stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all good for now. And eventually go there. And there is also some differences too of people that just want to lose 20 pounds. And there is somebody that's trying to heal an autoimmune issue. Right.
Good
And
point.
so we gotta, people that are a severe eczema, right? Crohn's, whatever. I think those are also where you got to say, hey, like, we're going to have to eliminate and then slowly bring back in. So you're going to have to get a little strict. So it is, you mentioned it earlier, it's dependent upon the person. Now you get people on, and like I've done this too, where they get onto the diet and they feel good at first and they kind of hit some of the lulls. How do you coach people through some of the lulls?
It's like my favorite question, man. It's one of my favorite things to diagnose. When somebody's switching from, presumably a standard American diet, or they're just, maybe they've done paleo has been a little bit more popular in the last decade or so, and now they want to push towards a low carbohydrate diet. It's great because in the beginning, pretty much anything will work. Like, if you're replacing sodas with, the stevia drinks or what other people are using, that's a step. That's a good step in the right direction. If somebody is using keto bread versus regular bread, hey, that's a step. It's not my favorite, but that's a good step in the right direction. Maybe people are changing the way they're doing their desserts and that kind of thing, and that's good. But inevitably, I always when I would do those weight loss contests, I'd go for 2 months, and this would be the topic of the middle seminar that I would do. 4 weeks in, it seems like 4 or 5 weeks is where people have gotten good results, but maybe they're starting to slow down. How can I kind of bust through this plateau? And more or less, it would be related to what you said, is like weight loss. How can I continue to lose weight? And this is where I would start to kind of realize that, like, the things that got you here may or may not be the things that get you past this point. And yes, like, you're healthier, you're probably feeling better. You may decide this is where you want to get to and you want to stop, or you may decide you want to push past this and go a little further. I do think if you want to push past that hump and get a little further, it is going to require a new level of I guess I'll say strictness. You have to do something a little bit more to get more of the results. So really common things that I would be diagnosing. Two of the really easy ones would be like fruits and vegetables. If you were doing them in the beginning, fine. I don't like lumping fruits and vegetables even in the same thing, and I try to explain why both of those are different and why I try to kind of get those out. But that's one that if somebody's in a stall, I might say, let's try to diminish. Let's get rid of that. Another one might be nuts and seeds. So again, somebody's starting, maybe they're having tons of almonds or cashews or whatever. Excuse me. And that's a good start. It's better than the crap they were having before. But I would challenge people to say, like, when you have a handful of almonds, do you ever have a handful of almonds and think like, that was good, I'm set, I'll be fine for like another few hours? Like, no, you have some, and then you have some, and then you have some, and now you're consuming a food that you would have never been able to consume this amount of without a tremendous amount of work, busting the shells of all these nuts, having them one at a time. Now you're having them by the handful. They're already shelled for you. Like, that's probably one that we need to dial down. I find that dairy can be problematic for some people. If they were using dairy in the beginning and that was helpful, maybe that's something to kind of dial back on, to clean up. Another thing is, like, I don't think people realize how detrimental it can be to just even have sweet things, maybe not like sugar or what we would consider like high carbohydrate things, but they're sneaking in a way that's like really gradual. So it might even be down to like gum that people chew or breath mints that people have, or like if they just have a Jolly Rancher in the middle of the day or whatever. Like, if you're sneaking those sweet things in, it may not be high carbohydrate. You may be able to fit that perfectly into a low carbohydrate diet because there's so little of it. But I wonder whether even a low amount of something really sweet is triggering your insulin hormones in particular and telling your body that sweet things are incoming, and to be in more of a fat storage mode that's kind of hindering somebody's fat loss in particular. So that to me is something that can be really, really sneaky. I'm not going to say, like, again, that like fruit made people obese and you should avoid that, but it's understanding that fruit is a lot different now than it used to be in the past. You can eat whatever fruit you want 365 days out of the year, regardless of where you are on the planet. And it's bred for sweetness. We don't like bitter taste. And so we've been breeding these things to be, the size of softballs, again, available all year. Is that going to make you fat? Maybe, maybe not. But if you're trying to lose weight and lose fat, that's, I think, would be something I'd really want to kind of cut down on.
Yeah, I use the pint of ice cream analogy a lot because it's also down to the person. I don't know if I ever told you the pint of ice cream analogy. Like,
Can't wait.
Moderators and abstainers, right? I can moderate and I can abstain. For me, this is me. Like, I am not a moderator. I need to abstain from it because if I open a pint, like, even think of like healthy, quote unquote, this is in quotations, air quotes, like a Halo Top. That's what I was thinking. A Halo Top ice cream. If I open the top and I get a spoon, the pint's gone. There's no other version of the story. I'm eating the whole thing. And I think it's wild to me when people, like, I'll be like hanging with somebody and they have 2 bites and they put the top back on and they put it in the freezer. I'm like, what are you doing? They're like, oh, that's enough for me. I go, wow. I am astonished because I just know myself. And like you were saying, a little bit of fruit here, a little bit of thing. I've done that where I'll buy, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go animal based this week. And I'll have bananas. I'll have fruit, the raw honey. But then I find myself, I will knock all, like, it's supposed to last me the week, and I will knock it all down within a day or two. And I'm like, shit, I just ate all this in one sitting and I can't stop. But so, yeah, the abstaining, versus just moderating. And if you can moderate it, great. But if it's a trigger for you, just get it out of there. Get it out of there.
So around here in Utah, where I'm from, the 4th of July is a big deal, but a bigger deal is Pioneer Day. So on July 24th was the day that the pioneers, the Mormon pioneers, entered the Salt Lake Valley and settled here. And so the 24th of July is actually a bigger holiday than the 4th of July around here. It's a huge deal. And so if you're in the Mormon church, you call it Pioneer Day. And if you're not in the Mormon church, you call it Pie and Beer Day. And it's kind of like to poke fun and have something to celebrate as well. And it was, honestly, it was probably 3 years ago, 2021, that it was Pie and Beer Day. I've been doing carnivore for a good 2 years and change at that point. And I'm like, screw it, it's a holiday. Like, I'm going to go grab myself a pie. And I bought a pie, peach pie, I'll never forget. And I had a bite, and I had a bite, and I had a bite, and I had a bite. I'm like, okay, that was a really decent amount of pie. I've eaten like a third of this pie. So I just had a bite, and then I had a bite, and then I had a bite. And I'm like, okay, wow, I've eaten like half this pie. I didn't stop until the pie was gone. My sleep was terrible. I was like cold sweats all night. And I noticed that my anxiety kicked right back up. I started worrying about stuff that was never going to happen. Just spinning again in anxiety. And it wasn't like the worst. Like, I didn't have like bipolar or have a seizure or like, didn't have a heart attack or anything like that. It was just not, it was very uncomfortable. And that's kind of the day I decided, like, wow, I am not a moderator. As much as I love to tell people who can, and I'm envious the same as you, as somebody who can have a few bites and put something away, I can't do that. Like, the last time I did decide to cheat, I just wanted a peanut butter burger, which it sounds really weird, but it's super good.
I've had them.
They're good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, super good. So I'm like, cool. I just want to do this. I'm going to do this one weekend. I'll make some buns. I'll cook them in butter and I'll have like 2 or 3 of these and be done with it. And sure enough, this jar of peanut butter that I got is like peanuts and salt. It's not even like sugar added or anything. It's just all natural peanut butter. Dude, the thing's gone in 2 days. Like, it's gone. And I can't stop. It's way more peanut butter than I wanted to eat in like a day or two. And it's gone. So it sucks. It sucks, but it's like, if you can't like moderate, then you have to be an abstainer, and it's better for a lot of people.
Yeah, I've had those burgers Elvis style. I don't know if you've ever had that.
No, teach me.
Bananas Foster's with the peanut butter with bacon on it. Like, yeah, it's crazy. I don't know, but
that sounds
weird.
Amazing. Somebody who was challenging me on carnivore a little while ago was like, well, don't you like bread? Well, don't you like rice? Well, don't you like potatoes? Or what about like risotto? You don't like those things? I'm like, no. I love all those things. It's not whether I like them or not. They just don't do that well for me. But I do like them.
I just actually interviewed Anthony Chafee, and he tells a story, episode 26, check it out. He tells a story about how he's 10 years old and he eats a 10-pound bag of gummy bears. Yep. He's like, I couldn't stop. Stop. I'm like, yeah. So, and that's the thing. You're going through this, and there's some that coaching that, I like when you were talking about your clients and talking with them, like, hey, if this is where you want to stop, like, this is it. If you want to push, like, this is the things you have to do. And also changing the narrative a little bit. And because we've been talking about a lot of weight loss, but it's also the piece of like, how are you feeling? Like, how do you feel like changing this diet up? Because I can't think of anybody that has gone to a low carb or keto, carnivore, even mostly like animal based too. There's a lot of people that just say, I feel really good. And I think that's like its success. And forget the freaking scale, but that just by itself is a success alone.
Yeah, I agree. It really is very much aligned with what Dr. Chafee always talks about, is like, this, if we are, generally carnivore in nature, obviously we're omnivore and we can consume a lot of different things. We're just in a totally different food environment than we were before. And if we thrive on primarily animal foods, then it stands to reason that changing the diet is not just the best for weight loss, but is great for all of these other things. To the point that people are willing to say, like, I am going to only eat animal products. I am going to skip all the delicious Bananas Foster's and bacon Elvis burgers. As delicious as they sound, it comes to this point of like, is it worth me sacrificing my mental clarity and my energy? And like, I'm 40 years old and I can skate down, 20-year-olds at the ice rink. And, I feel great. Like I feel better than I did 10 years ago, and I still can cycle really fast and have good energy for all my clients. So recently we spent some time with family, and they don't eat the same way that we do. And I see the parents, with all these toddlers around, the toddlers are not eating very well, and the parents are also not eating that great. And I just, they look tired. You know what I mean? Like they of course you're going to be tired. You've got kids and, other circumstances, but like, man, it would be really hard to be a parent and be fully present and not lose your temper or, have the energy when the kids need attention all the time. You know what I mean? Like I would have a hard time wondering how would I be a parent the way that I would want to parent by doing something different other than this. Like I wouldn't be something that I would be willing to give up, or even I would argue like could give up and be like an effective parent. So yeah, it's interesting to know that there's so many people that do try this, and yes, the fat loss is great. Yes, the weight loss is great, but I promise you're going to come to a time when you even forgot about the weight loss and the fat loss. You're doing this because of all these other benefits and just feeling great. And again, all the things that we see with our clients it's pretty awesome. It's the only diet I know of that like you'll literally forget about like the primary reason why you thought you wanted to go on this diet, which is fat loss.
To your point, I'm 35 now. I feel better and stronger and more mental clarity. I'm more productive than like when I was in my 20s. It's not even a question. Like the fact that I don't know how many freaking episodes a week that you do. It's ridiculous how many podcasts you have, but just like the productivity that you have, and you got to be on, right, all the time. There's something to the diet, and the fat loss is great, but the feeling is good too. And I want to kind of segue to kind of an opposite end, and I have like my own thoughts on this too. Like when people go to carnivore, and is there a limit to how much like meat and fat that you can have? Will that have some adverse effects? You had any clients that had experience?
That's a great question. I love that. I'm going to paraphrase something that really stood out to me in Nina Teichel's work in her book, The Big Fat Surprise, where I'm going to goof this up again. I'm just paraphrasing, but she was talking about somebody who I want to say it was over a century ago was using at the time low carbohydrate diets to help people with weight loss and fat loss. And basically they understood back then, even around like the turn of the 19th or the 20th century, that like, if you wanted to get fat, you would eat, bread and pasta and rice and that kind of thing. If you eliminated that stuff, you could lose weight. And they were saying that like there must be an upper limit of meat and fat that we can give people where they're not seeing more benefit or something is going wrong and they're having problems. There must be some type of a limit to where that is, but we can't find it. We don't know where that is. And so practically, to answer the question, is there? Maybe. But practically speaking, I have never seen it. I think it would be extremely challenging to even try to get to, because the food that you're consuming, especially once you're kind of, really aligned with a carnivore diet, and especially like if you're more habituated to more like red meat, ruminant meat. In the beginning, I noticed a lot of people, especially women, just like the chicken and fish and that kind of thing, but their taste buds change and they like more of the red meat. The food just becomes so satiating and filling. It becomes a real challenge to eat as much as you think. And you probably can relate to this. Like I make dinners all the time and I know about how much I eat. And if I overshoot that, it's such an inconvenience. If I like have like 2 or 3 more bites and I'm looking at this delicious steak and it looks so good. And it was delicious 3 minutes ago. And now I can't even like bring myself to put it in my mouth. Like I don't want it anymore because I've got an aversion to that food, where like your fullness hormones are just as strong as your hunger hormones. And when you're, satiated with your food, it's hard to overeat. So I think, again, practically speaking, that would be really challenging to find what that limit would be. So yeah, I would probably lean towards like, no, at least as far as what I can tell, I've not been able to find an upper limit. I think the food just kind of self-selects how much you should have. And in that way, carnivore is a nice kind of like boundary to set, to say like, within carnivore, I can be intuitive. I can have my choice and eat something that sounds good to me today. Like pork doesn't always sound good to me, but few times a year, it sounds great. Same with fish. Doesn't always sound good to me, but every now and again, like to do like a sashimi fillet of, tuna or salmon sounds really good for some reason. Chicken. I don't eat a lot of chicken, but in the summer times, for whatever reason, it sounds really good to me, and I'll eat more than that than I normally do. And as long as I've got the border of like, okay, I'm just including animal foods, now I can be intuitive within those animal foods to find out which things sound good to me. Is it a fatty ribeye today, or maybe is it sirloin tomorrow? It's a little bit leaner. So, yeah, as far as a limit, I haven't really found one. Have you?
Kind of, actually. So
Okay.
it's been interesting this like past, I would say like 8 months or so, maybe even actually maybe almost closer to the year. Like I've noticed that I've slowly started gaining weight, like slowly. And it's not by much. And what would happen is I would start to gain, and I only eat like the same, like I eat the same stuff very, very consistently. It's about 2 pounds. And I've been doing that for a while. My activity level hasn't really changed very much. Um, and I started to notice like I was naturally about 185. Very rarely would I touch up to 190. And then now that like over, I don't know, maybe 4 months ago, I had to step on the scale. I barely even look at the scale, to be honest. And I stepped on the scale. I was like, oh, I'm on like 196. That's odd. I didn't put on that much muscle. I know I didn't, but I haven't changed my meals, and my activity level has been kind of the same. So it's just like a slow creeping thing. And what I ended up having to do is I had to make weight for my strong first kettlebell 2, because we have to weigh in. So I'm like, shoot, I got to weigh in at 185. So I'm like, I got to make, I got to cut 11 pounds here, which is for me is easy because I'm, former wrestler. I know how to do it, but I'm like, I'm not going to dehydrate myself. So it was kind of funny. I started just like literally taking the 2 pounds, and like I would take a quarter of it. So I'd have just a quarter pound and put it off to the side. And I would do that for like 4 meals in a row. And I just started like just the dial started to go down a little bit.
Hmm.
So I actually was like, that was my meal, 2 pounds. And I only know it's 2 pounds generally because I would get like the big packets of the pound ground beef. So it was always
Yeah.
measured out. And that's
Yeah.
mostly what I would have every now and again, a steak. I'll average one steak or two, like it'd be exactly almost 2 pounds, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. But I started taking that down. I started noticing that that was literally 2 weeks before I had to weigh in. I just started doing that. And then
Hmm.
every time, like I would do 4 meals, that was 1 pound left over. Right. And I would just add that to the next meal and kind of deal. And I just kind of be doing this shifting around. So for me, for some reason, just a little bit over, I start to slowly gain weight. And I switched over to I go back and forth. I mix it now. I go 85-15, and then I go the higher like ground beef that's like a 97, right? And typically I want that
Very lean.
fat. It's very lean, and I'm starting to drop some body fat
Cool.
slowly. But that's where I hit my this theory. And I think Vinny Torridge did a post about it. He's like, you just can't eat as much fat and meat as you want without impunity. And so I started kind of like thinking, and like, and it's like, damn, I mean, that's 11 pound swing, and I didn't change anything. Workout, same amount,
Yeah.
same meal. So for me, I kind of did hit it. And I don't really know what changed. Maybe just I know that there's been research that every 10 years your body changes over, and whatever it may be. But that's where I hit, and that little change actually. Now I'm kind of within the 185, 190.
Cool.
I'm gonna keep doing it until I kind of get
Cool.
down a little bit. But that's where I hit, which was very unique.
Yeah, that's great. And I think relating to weight loss, like we talked about calories earlier, and it's not like they don't matter. Like they can matter. And if you're taking part of it and just maybe not overstuffing yourself, that may be a great way to lose weight and lose fat. You may need to look at like you mentioned, like the ratio of fat in your diet to protein. Like this last year, I love eggs, and I've been eating more and more and more eggs. And I got to this point where I could eat 10 eggs in the middle of the day, and then maybe have dinner and not only have steak, but maybe another few eggs with that. Or maybe on the weekends, I could eat like 20 at a time, all scrambled up with a bunch of butter. And I started to feel like I was getting a little bit bloated, and my weight was also creeping up as well. And I know I've had an egg sensitivity in the past. I've just kind of wondered, like, man, maybe I'm overdoing it a little bit. And so I just kind of reduced that down a little bit. I don't do eggs at night anymore, and only when I'm like, if I'm really hungry, I'll have them in the middle of the day. And I do think that helped me feel less bloating, and my weight did drop after that. So you're right. Like it's like if you're feeling good and you're okay with your body composition, that's great. But it's not like especially related to weight loss, just eating all of it, whatever you want, whenever. It's not without some impunity, like you said. And so interesting to consider, and you can always test on yourself and see how you're doing when you're mixing some of those things up.
Yeah, I think of like strength training, beginner gains. Like I'm gonna make all these gains, and then all of a sudden I'm gonna plateau, and then you're gonna have to you're not gonna make those jumps anymore. You're gonna lose weight as much, but you don't want to forget what got you there,
Right.
but you're gonna have to be tweaks. And this is like again, we talk about all the time. Like this is a lifelong thing. This is not
Yep.
the carnivore fad. It's not a fad. We've been eating like this forever. Um,
Right.
and so you know, Coach Bronson always talks about self-exploration, right?
Yeah.
Be willing to flow and change and not be like, okay, I can, just be carnivore, then I'm going to be skinny and jacked. Like, no, there's
Right.
there's there's more avenues to it. And with this next piece I kind of want to talk about is fasting. I have my own thoughts about fasting. I utilized it for a very long time. I know you used to do OMAD a lot. Do you still have the same thoughts about fasting today?
Another really good question. So I find that in the beginning, when I'm talking about fasting, I need to be very, very clear about what we're even talking about. Some people think of fasting and they think of week-long fasting or weekday fasting or dry fasting versus wet fasting and all these different terms. And there's so much kind of connotation with what fasting is. I try to just remind people that just the word fasting means a time that you're not eating. So everybody does it. If you fall asleep and you don't eat while you sleep, you're fasting. You know what I mean? Like everybody does it. I think fasting in that kind of context is a perfectly natural and normal thing that people can do. I'm not one that is a huge proponent of doing what I would consider extended fasting. I kind of think of that as maybe like 24 hours plus. Um, I think it is helpful for people, and some people can leverage it and do really well with it. You just have to know what you're doing, and you need to know how to balance your electrolytes and how to come off of a fast. And it's just a little bit more, not only maybe more challenging, but a little bit more to consider. So I don't like people doing long fasts without working with an expert, somebody that can help them make sure they're doing that in a healthful way. That said, I have seen people get amazing results and like literally lose a pound plus per day of fat and then come in on a 5-day fast and like PR their deadlifts. Like, you know what I mean? Like your strength goes through the roof and like your mental clarity is great. So I have seen it work for a lot of people. It's just not something that I mess with a lot. I will tell most people that like anything within 24 hours seems to be just fine for most people. Especially if a weight loss goal, like you have fat that you store, you can burn it in a fasted state. The body seems to regulate itself really, really well. I've also noticed that like when people say that, oh, fasting requires gluconeogenesis and that's going to burn up your muscle tissue, like that's in the context of somebody who's burning a lot of carbohydrate. When somebody's burning fat, they don't need a lot of sugar. They need a little bit of sugar inside their body. And so the need for gluconeogenesis is far, far, far lower. So I test people who do fasting all the time, and I never see them lose muscle tissue. They can maintain or even gain muscle tissue in that state. Um, and so I don't think it's a terrible thing for people to sit down and think about their day and think about, when they're the busiest and when they're not busy and when it might be a good idea to kind of maybe like kick the can down the road for their first meal of the day or when they could end their last meal of the day a little bit sooner. I think there's by and large a lot of benefit to that. It's not something, again, I promote with everybody. And I would like most people to get into that in a very natural way where like I didn't tell them to fast, but they missed breakfast and now like the hunger at lunch kind of went and it came and went and like they're no longer hungry and now they're back to work and busy and like okay, I mean, should I eat? I didn't feel that hungry or was only hungry for like 15-20 minutes. What should I do? And it's like, no, in that state you can definitely just push past it. And fasting is a great tool that you can use in that sense where you're not eating all the time. So again, within reason, I think you can relate to this as well. There was a time in my life where I was doing OMAD religiously, And I did it for over a year, probably closer to 2 years, where I was eating the same thing. I was eating at the same time. I'd fast for 23 hours and then repeat. And I would do that all the time. And I did get to a place where I noticed myself, the kind of symptoms of a metabolic kind of slowdown. A really easy thing that people can understand is temperature. Like if you start to feel cold in your hands and feet, that's a good sign your body is reducing its own innate metabolic rate. And you might be overdoing it on the fasting. You might be benefited to adding a second meal here or there. So yeah, I don't have any hard, fast rules on it where I am at this point. Like I'll typically have eggs prepared and ready to go, like hard-boiled eggs. And if it makes sense that day, if I feel hungry, if I am not busy, sure, I'll throw, anywhere from 5 to 10 eggs down the hatch, and then that will be my first meal, and I'll have the second meal, later on. But it's so many times during the day where I do get busy, and it's like I'm just not going to get to it. It's more convenient for me not to, and I just won't. And it's also too, like I've learned in my own performance, like if I'm going to do a bike ride, or even if I'm going to play hockey, which is like highly glycolytic, my hockey games start at 11:30 in the morning and go until 1 p.m. I find that when I eat before a hockey game, even if it's just something like eggs, I feel kind of sluggish. I don't feel that great. I don't skate that fast. And so I am way better in a fasted state, even that late in the day, playing an hour and a half, pretty quick pace, quick tempo ice hockey where you're pretty much maximum intensity and then resting and maximum intensity and resting. I do better fasted with that without anything. So that's kind of the way I like to think of it. I definitely think it's a better tool for people that want to burn fat and lose weight. Other people can kind of consider how that fits in their life, but I would want it to be something kind of natural. How have your thoughts evolved on that over time?
Yeah, like you, I was doing OMAD, and I mean, it was probably like a year I was doing OMAD pretty consistently, maybe not every single day, but probably like 320 days out of the year I did OMAD.
Wow.
And it was just really religious on it, and I started feeling good. I liked it for the convenience piece. Here's my window. I like to eat between 4 and 6. If I eat too early, like I'm gonna want to eat later. Like it was a weird thing. But if I just skip my breakfast, skip my lunch, I would just have that meal between 4 and 6. That was a sweet spot. I know my timing. I know what meal I'm gonna make, so the convenience was really great. But like you, I started kind of feeling kind of sluggish and kind of just and I feel like I just didn't have that much energy. So then I started doing I would have a lunch. It'd be this almost the exact same meal, just split up. I would do like a pound of ground beef or a pound of steak at lunch, and then a pound like between 4 and 6. And then for some weird reason, that just made me feel better. It's literally the same
Cool.
amount of food. So I would cycle that. I would do OMAD here, and then I would do 2 meals a day here. And then like on a Saturday, I kind of took this like kind of like a Benazati, where he was like talk about like feasting every once in a while. I would
Cool.
just make a huge omelet, and like I wouldn't have, it would still be like bacon, eggs, butter, but it'd be big as hell. And I eat until I'm full, and maybe I'll eat later that day, maybe I won't, but I allow myself I have no window. There's no window.
Cool.
And I
Yeah.
ate breakfast, which I never do. So I played around with that, and I started feeling better.
Good.
My thing that I tell people, I say this on almost every podcast, like fasting is a superpower. I think people should do it. It's not you can go without a meal. Like you'll be fine. Go try a 24-hour, or work your way up to a 24-hour. But if you get in situations where there's really bad food, that office party, that family party, whatever, you can navigate through that and not be like, okay, I've done this before.
Yeah.
It's been my dinner time and I didn't eat. So if you can tackle that, and be that abstainer, your life is going to go a lot easier, because if you've never tried fasting and then you go into those environments, it's more than likely you're going to cave. And that's what stinks. And like you said, fasting is a tool. Like you got to have the right tool for the right job.
That's
You
right.
gotta hang a picture. You don't use a jackhammer. So
Good point.
but I want to end the podcast with a couple things for people that are either on this journey, or looking to get into this journey of carnivore, keto, a primal diet, whatever it may be. What's 3 different books that you can recommend them?
That's a great question, dude. I love that. Oh boy, 3 different books that I could recommend. It was good.
I know one for sure out of my head, but I want to see if you say it.
I'm going to say the big fat surprise right off the bat. I don't think you have to be interested in nutrition. I think it's a really interesting story, and a really thrilling story. It's a book that I've read several times that I really love and appreciate. That would be one for sure. Hard to narrow some down. I've got to like look. I think a second one I would probably recommend is Why We Get Sick by Dr. Ben Bickman. Um, I didn't I didn't think it was the most like groundbreaking book, but it's by and large, as I talk to people out in the community, that's the one that seems to be the one that connected the most with people that were just learning some of this stuff about insulin and insulin resistance and why they're treating, diabetes and dementia and PCOS and all of these different things that all seem separate. His book does such a great job of showing that all these different things are one single thing. And I think he presents that really, really well. So that would be a second one. I would probably have to give Dr. Baker some credit for his book, which again, if somebody's getting started, is his book The Carnivore Diet? I can't remember.
Carnivore Diet. Yep.
Carnivore Diet. It's in his kind of light and easy to understand style that people can appreciate. And as much as I love and respect Paul Saladino, and I've got the Carnivore Code behind me, and I use that as a reference for lots of different things, I don't have many people that I can give that to that would like really appreciate how in depth that gets into certain things. So Sean Baker's book keeps things a lot more simple. Those would be the three that I would probably be the most prone to recommend in the beginning. Dr. Bill Schindler's book is amazing. Any of Gary Taub's books, including The Case for Keto, are really, really great. I'll recommend that one. There's others if people are looking for a particular like niche, like The Vegetarian Myth is great, or Jane Reese Buxton writing The Great Plant-Based Con was wonderful, and goes in real depth. And I love those books. But if you're asking recommendations, it would probably be those three.
Nice. And what's on the horizon for Casey Ruff? Any new projects coming up or anything you're looking forward
this
to?
question. I suck at planning, dude. Like I'm just, as much as I like to say that this is on the horizon and we're taking Boundless Body to the stratosphere, we're going to have 10,000, 50,000 followers, whatever. I'm not very good at planning, and we have a really fun, happy business, and doing what we do is great. And no real plans this summer. I'm doing a nutrition seminar kind of series in a park by my house, where every week we've got a lesson that we teach and an outline. We just did a whole lesson about cholesterol, and people had lots of really great questions about that. That's been really fun to teach people like the things we talked about as far as like macronutrients and calories in, calories out, and why counting calories is not necessarily the best thing. So that's just something I do for fun and for free. And I actually had somebody fly down from Washington to attend the class this week. He was so excited about it, and I actually got to meet him and hang out with him, not expecting that or whatever, but got to meet a really great friend who came out just for that. But we're posting all that stuff to our website. So if we do decide to do anything or any projects, or if people are interested in like that series, if they want to get it, like all the stuff is on our website. They can go to myboundlessbody.com, which is our website. They can click on seminar. All of the lessons are there. All of the outlines are there. I gave these people the exact same meal plans I described before that we gave to the people in the weight loss contest. Those are all free. Everything's there. People can access it. They can watch the videos of what I'm recording. So yeah, whether people are in town or not, they can access that or at least get all the stuff. But we just kind of keep that on the website. But yeah, that's about as exciting as things are around here at the moment, I would say.
Dude, people are traveling all over the country to come see you.
One person.
That's what I heard. They're traveling all over the country to see you. That's what I heard.
We'll go with that. That's fine.
I know you gotta get going, but just for real, I said this the first time I had you on the podcast. When I was thinking about a podcast, you literally were the first. I said Casey Ruff has to be my first guest, and definitely you were one of the inspirations for me to even start getting the space. So thank you for all the work you've been doing and all the information you share with people. I'm gonna attach all of your links into the show notes, but it's good to catch up with you. I know you gotta get rolling, but till next time, I guess.
Till next time. Yeah. Till next time, dude. I thank you for the kind words. I love hanging out with you. I'm so proud of everything that you've been able to accomplish, not only with your own physical goals, but to see how well the podcast is doing, to see you at Hack Your Health and meeting all these people was just, it was really awesome. And you're really very, very well loved and respected out there. So always a
Thank you.
pleasure to chat with you. You're doing great work.
Absolutely. Thanks for everybody listening to the I almost said Boundless Body Radio.
Great. Thanks for advertising.
Boundless Body Radio. Thanks for listening to the Primal Foundations podcast.